And yes, we've also started the recording, just so everyone's aware. Good morning, Kay, from Virginia. That's great. I used to live in Virginia. Oh, nice. There's a lot of Virginia folks. It's great. Great to see in the chat. Let's just give everyone a few more minutes and we'll get rolling. Okay. Yeah, so all right, let's get started. So thank you everyone for joining, and if other people trickle in throughout this, that's all right as well. But I do want to get us going. Welcome, thank you for joining the Champion Office Hours. We're happy to have you. We'll go through a couple housekeeping slides, and then we will jump into the questions. So first and foremost, just wanted to mention our Marketo user groups are a safe space. We are meant to be kind of exchanging ideas and lessons learned in the industry or the business, so to speak. So one thing I like to mention at the top of every Marketo user group or mug is no self-promotion or pitching of any kind is allowed. This is a pretty important rule. It's probably the only one that will really be very, very keen on, because as soon as we start to pitch or promote, it kind of changes the tone of the event, and it's really meant to be educational and community-based. So just want to mention that. If you are curious of someone's use case or something that they mention here, maybe just chat them first here before you reach out on LinkedIn. It's meant to be community building, so totally fine to, check in with folks on LinkedIn, but we like to try to get permission here before you do that as much as you can. And then again, just kind of try to keep the use cases and things that you've learned. It's totally fair to talk about them outside of the user group, but just ask if you're going to kind of post anything on LinkedIn or write a blog post or, get into some nitty-gritty detail there. Just wanted to note that this is being recorded. And then this is a great opportunity to stay connected wherever you are. I know this is our office hours. We have kind of a roving invite so that it's, a different time zone. It's friendly for different time zones, and this is friendly for our EMEA time zone. We have these at different times as well. So definitely join this chapter. It's a great way of virtually staying connected. The link is right here. Just a couple quick opportunities for members. If you haven't gotten a chance to sign up for or register for Adobe Summit in 2025 yet, it's right around the corner. You can join in person, of course, and you can also join virtually. So definitely check it out. Lots of great lessons and things to be able to learn there. We've got an interactive webinar enablement next week on Wednesday. So don't forget to join that. It's going to be really great. Interactive webinars is a very important and very curiosity building topic right now. So great opportunity to kind of see under the hood a little bit. Also have plenty of user group meetings throughout the rest of the month. Some of these are in person, some of them are virtual. If you get a chance over the next few weeks and you do see a virtual one, definitely sign up, definitely join. We'd love to have you. So without further ado, we will jump into our pre-submitted questions. So we will start off Katja, and I think she's going to take us through some batch and trigger campaigns, differences, primary use cases. These are some of the pre-submitted questions that we'll start with, but if you have a question, feel free to drop it into the chat for me, and I will slot it into our flow. And yeah, let's kick it off. Katja, over to you.
Yep, thank you so much, Shivani. Indeed, one of the questions that we received was to learn a little bit more about the difference between batch and trigger campaigns. And I think that the key word there is with trigger campaigns, that's always going to be a one-on-one smart campaign that responds to something that happens for one individual person. So two clear use cases are a new person entering the database and all of the housekeeping activities that you need to set. So as soon as that person enters the database, that is a trigger, and based on that, something happens specifically for that person only. Another typical example of where you use trigger campaigns is when somebody fills out a form because they want to register for an event or they want to download a white paper. As soon as that one person fills out the form, they get individually processed in a smart campaign to get their confirmation, to get their event registration started up. So that's always going to be a one-on-one. A batch campaign is always going to be something that runs for multiple people at the same time. So you have a smart list with criteria that you define, and everybody who meets the criteria will be going through that smart campaign all at the same time. And a batch campaign you can run once, but you can also set it on a daily or weekly schedule. And one thing to bear in mind when you decide what the best solution is for your use case is that although trigger campaign is very powerful and very useful to respond immediately to what somebody does, it is also heavier on the Marketo platform. So when you have a choice, I would always recommend to go for the batch campaign, and probably a recurring batch campaign like running daily rather than the trigger campaign. So if it doesn't have to happen immediately when somebody performs an action, go for a batch campaign. But for instance, with the form fills, always go for that trigger campaign.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katja. So we did have a couple other questions that were teed up, but we have one in the chat that a few people have. So I'm going to pop us over to that for a second, and then we'll get back to our kind of regularly scheduled programming, if you will. We had a question in the chat on Munchkin codes did not work on an AEM site, and if there's any advice or recommendations on where to troubleshoot. Do any of our champs want to take a stab at it?
I'd say it's difficult to troubleshoot without seeing the context. My first question would be to explore how the code is implemented into the site. Is it in the proper place? Is there any synchronization issues? So go to the console and check out what's happening there on the page.
Yeah, one thing I would add when you're troubleshooting is to ensure that the records that you're validating against have indeed been cookied. So like within Marketo specifically, a lead is only, or I'm a little old school. A person is only gets cookied when they fill out a Marketo form or some type of form that sets the Munchkin cookie on the person's browser, or they fill out, or they interact with a Marketo email through clicking a link. So what you may be running into is a couple of different scenarios where either the person hasn't been cookied and you need to just ensure that you're troubleshooting against folks that you have validated have had the cookie set. Additionally, you want to make sure that your cookie permissions have been agreed upon. So that could also be another reason why you're not seeing web form activities.
Yeah, so when you're testing it, the recommendation would always be to test from an incognito browser window. I would do a first check with something like Ghostery to verify that your code is actually there. And then indeed test with an incognito window so that you don't have conflicting cookies. You have a clean scenario that you're testing with, and simply go through the steps. I tend to actually create an email, send it to myself, do a real send, and then click on that link so that indeed I make sure that my test record gets properly cookied.
Can I just throw in there as well to add to your point, Katja and Chris? If you're using something like Google Chrome, you could use the inspect tool and you can use the console just to see whether any cookies been dropped anyway, just to see if that is just working just fine. But if you can just in the chat as well, just put in how you're deploying that as well, because some people, even though they're using AEM, also use tag deployment tools like Google Tag Manager, for example, as well as embedding that code into the AEM solution. So just pop it into there as well. We'll be able to help.
Excellent, thank you. Any other pointers on this topic? We have a couple other questions in the chat, so we can also get to those in a second. Okay, let's jump to one more that came up in the chat. So the question is, what is the difference in smart lists between member of program is true, program is not, and member of program is false, program is, and I'm just reading this from the chat, so if it's a lot, pull it up there. And when would you use one versus the other? So if you're in a smart campaign, you don't want to include anyone who's in a particular other program.
That is a tricky one indeed to work with. Member of program is true and program is not actually means that you're looking for all people who are member of any program except for the one that you specify as being false. Whereas when you say member of program is false and you specify the program is, you're getting everybody who is not member of that specific program. So the first scenario, you get people who are members of all other programs, or any other programs, I should say. And the second scenario explicitly gives you any person who is not a member of that program, regardless whether they are a member of any other program.
Yeah, in my usage of these particular filters, I tend to stay away from the overall, like member of program overall, like member of program true, because it does like record like, you know, you're a member of any particular program, and that would include your operational programs.
Exactly.
So generally the use cases that you're looking for, like you're looking for specific program membership, or you're looking for somebody who's not a member of a specific program for like some kind of exclusion or suppression list. But there may be some use cases for that overall trigger. But I think most of our use cases, we'd want to use the member of program is or is not trigger for like inclusion or exclusion criterias.
Chris, we use them at Kainos for excluding anyone that's currently going through onboarding. So it's a great way just to say if you're targeting an audience, but excluding these members or these guys who are sort of being onboarded through our sort of customer successes teams. Might be a good example there.
Excellent, thank you. I think this is a great transition into one of the pre-submitted questions we'd had. So we'd had one around event programs with multiple dates, and I'm going to tap Ilona for this. The question was, how do you set up an event program with multiple date selections, forms, and to kind of set up the smart campaigns around those as well?
Yeah, I think kind of like depends also on the complexity and like the specific use case that you want to achieve. So basically how we are dealing with this in our organization is we're using a custom field where we offer like different like the dates that people can subscribe to, and that's the field is called event date code, and that's what we use for any other follow-up communication. So using that field for sending a confirmation email, for creating tasks in our CRM system for further follow-up, and also for further follow-up email communication regarding like a day before the event is taking place, or a thank you email. So I think that's like the most basic and easy way of approaching an event program, where you have people that, or where you have the option to select multiple dates. So you just include it in the form. But of course, if there are any other requirements or complexities, there may be different ways to approach this.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect use case for program member custom fields, where you can store it in a custom field within the context of that program, so that you also don't have different programs putting conflicting information in a person field. So I'd say that would be a perfect solution for it.
Mm.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other anything else to add from any of the other champs before I jump to the next one? Okay, seeing some smiles and head shakes, so I would say no. Great, so the next question that was pre-submitted we had was for Chris. What is the best way to ensure the default segment is not the largest?
All right, thank you so much. And I might pick up on a couple of the other questions that are submitted with this response. So I think the kind of the thought behind the question, if I'm, kind of reading into what you're asking, is essentially, I want, as you know, you only have 20 segmentations that you can build in Marketo. There's a limit to the number of segmentations you can build. And of course, each segmentation has a limit of 100 segments. So, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that, the segmentations that you are building are strategic, and that when you build those out, that you're that you have adequate data in your database to be able to ensure that segmentation is useful. So I think the first advice I would give, and this is a non-technical piece of advice, is to understand the strategic use of that segmentation. Is this something that is going to be part of your overall customer segmentation strategy, or are you doing this for a one-time campaign? Because you can get in trouble if you start creating segmentations for one-time efforts, and then you get into a situation where you start to hit your limit and you have to start removing segmentations. There was another question that was posed about, is there a way to remove unapproved segmentations if they're being used by emails? And unfortunately, the answer is no. Shivani, can I share my screen?
You should be able to. Yep, I can stop sharing
Okay.
for a second.
Okay. So I'll show you an example. So I'm looking at kind of a segmentation here, and if I attempt to unapprove this segmentation right now, it is being used. I'm going to get an error message that essentially says this is being used and I cannot unapprove it. And so this is a safety measure that Marketo has that ensures that if you're using an asset in a smart campaign, in a smart list, or in this case, you're using it for dynamic content, which is the primary use case for segmentations, that it cannot be accidentally deleted. So in order to delete that, in order to unapprove that, you can go in the canvas to the use by and see, okay, where are all the assets that are using this asset? And I'm going to go ahead and remove this landing page. So let me delete this landing page. And I'll go back to the segmentation. Let me refresh my screen. And once I have nothing that's being used, I can go ahead and unapprove that segmentation. So if you need to unapprove a segmentation, you'll need to look at the use by and essentially remove all of the assets that workflows, smart campaigns, smart lists, landing pages, and emails. And once you've removed those, then you can unapprove that asset. You do have the ability to archive segmentation, so you can develop an archive folder. So if you have a segmentation that you want to remove for whatever reason, and you don't have the ability, or you cannot delete all of those assets, you can move that segmentation to an archive folder, and that's another way you can handle kind of the management of your segmentations. So back to the original question, how do I ensure that, when I'm building out a segmentation, that I'm not running into this scenario where I have the largest chunk of my records in the default segment? And really the answer to that is you need to, again, one, have that strategic conversation, and then number two is look at how you're collecting the data and look at your fill rate of the data that you're going to be using to populate that segmentation. One very valuable way to do that is to use a program performance report to understand, so let's say, for example, I want to build a segmentation based upon industry. So I'll come in here and I can build a program performance report. So inside the program, I'm going to new local asset. I'm going to build a people performance report. And this is going to be champ office hours example. In the setup, I want to look at my total database. So I'm going to look at records that are created all time. And then I'm going to group people by the data points that I want to evaluate. So for a simple use case, if I just want to look at my industry data or a custom industry value, I'll select that data value and then just basically do a fill rate report on that. And essentially, ensuring that you're not seeing a lot of records show up in the default segment, you want to look for values that are filled that are going to meet your segmentation criteria. If you're seeing a lot of empty values or you're seeing a lot of bespoke values in this particular report, that would be an indication to you that you may want to look at your data strategy or look at another way of collecting this data that is going to give you a better fill rate before you create that segmentation. So I'll stop sharing. What other, so my colleagues on the call, do you have any additional kind of thoughts, tips?
Well, I'm thinking that having the majority of people in your default segment is not necessarily a bad thing. So if I look at two different use cases, for instance, I've got a customer where we're recently working with interest scoring, and we're having a segmentation to see which interests people are building up scores in. And for now, the majority of people definitely is in the default segment. And using that segmentation, we can do dynamic content and get the people who do have scores already there, personalized content. Whereas when we don't know yet, it's okay that they're in the default segment and they get a default content piece. So in that case, I don't think it's a bad thing. On the other hand, I always like to implement segmentation for emailability statuses as well. And with that one, I do make sure that I have a segment for all the possible scenarios, and that one is designed to have the default segment empty, so that I know that if I have people in the default segment, there's something wrong in my logic. So I don't think it's always necessarily bad to have a large default segment.
No, that's a really good point. And like having people in your default segment is a data point, and it could be a data point that, you know, there's either an error in your segmentation approach, like for the example that Katja mentioned, or if I need to or if I'm using this for like strategic segmentation, it may be telling me that I need to adjust my my targeting, my inbound targeting criteria to attract the right people into my database, or it may be an indicator that I need to enrich my data because I'm not capturing on an adequate number of records the data that's required to segment that those leads appropriately.
Awesome, thank you. Great discussion on that topic. Something we haven't really touched on yet, but came up in the chat that I think is a kind of nice tangential topic here is custom fields. So we had a question submitted in the chat. We have custom fields for our sales team on the user object in Salesforce that we would like to use in our Marketo email signature blocks when sending emails. These fields don't seem to be available though as tokens. Is there a way to utilize them? I think this is a great, maybe a chance to dive into some tokens as well. I'll jump to Ilona. Do you want to, Ilona or Charlie? We haven't heard from you in a minute, but also not to put you on the spot. Anyone can join. I just thought try to move it around a bit.
To be honest, I'm not sure, like using like on the user object in Salesforce, if you could like pull fields related to that object into tokens into Marketo. So I don't know, Charlie, if you have other experience with that. I haven't been in the situation, we'll say it like that. So
well, we use Dynamics at Keesom, and what we do is leads and contacts are automatically assigned to sales owners within the business, and we actually sync that data in as field data against a contact or object in Marketo when we are sending out, say, personalized comms as part of an outreach process that we actually do put in their names and contact details. It means that there's a little bit of a personal edge, particularly when it comes to trying to invite someone to a demo request. And actually we take that a little bit further, because we not only insert that into things like emails, into like an email signature on an email going out, but we also take that into dynamic chat. So then we're also lining them up to their calendar as well. So we actually store that because we want one person, one name as a field, and we sync that between Dynamics and Marketo.
Excellent.
That
and
was,
I think,
oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, please, Chris.
Yeah, I think that was the, you know, kind of the approach that I was going to recommend. There is, so I believe in the documentation that Marketo does, and we need to validate this, does have the ability to sync data over from the user object in Salesforce. You know, the most straightforward way is if you're able to get your Salesforce admins to replicate that account, like that user data onto the lead and contacts, that's going to be the easiest for you to diagnose. But one other item that you may want to look at, and this is my recommendation for anybody, in a like Salesforce org, is to have a conversation with your Salesforce admin around what the field level permissions for the Marketo sync user are on those objects, because some of the issues you may be facing may be related to admin settings that your Marketo sync user has within Salesforce, where those fields may not be visible based upon admin settings in Salesforce. So that's another recommendation I have, is make sure that you're having those conversations with your Salesforce admin, and that you're validating that against the permission sets and the profile that's set up for your sync user.
Excellent, thank you. Another good question that's come up in the chat, how to handle duplicate records in Marketo, if there are any recommendations or best practices. This is a good one. Any champions want to jump in on this?
Duplicates are always the nightmare in the Marketo world, aren't they? I would say your big starting point is going to be what is the source of your duplicates. If that's duplicates that already exist in CRM, I would handle that in CRM and not through the Marketo end. But if you have duplicates between your CRM and Marketo only records, you can merge them. Depending on the volume, you can do that as a manual task periodically. But you can also use the API with all sorts of tooling to set up rules for deduplication. But it's always really important to think hard about which record is going to be the winning record. And especially if you have things set up like custom objects, etc., it's important to realize that when you do merges, any custom object records that are associated with the losing record will actually become orphaned, so you won't be able to see them. They don't migrate across to the winning record. But there's all sorts of other logic that you can apply to determine what should be my winning record, but also think about what should be your surviving field logic. Because if you have an older Marketo record and a more recent CRM record, I would let the CRM record be the survivor. But for instance, something like a person source should come from the losing record, from the Marketo record that you merge into that one. So design it properly, and then I would suggest to always set something up through the API with a solid logic to do your merges in a scalable way, where you can also predict the outcome.
Can I throw in there as well, if you're not comfortable with the API, there are tools out there. I think some of the people have put some recommendations in there, Cloudingo, Ringlead. I do know OpenPrease and others in there. But as Katja said, that'll help you identify all those records. However, you'll have to find the source of the duplicates. For us, it's our CRM. It's constantly creating multiple versions of the same person in Marketo. However, if they're a contact or a lead. So work with your admins on that when it comes to the CRM issues.
Chris?
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to circle back to the last question, this question about like how much data from the user object is synced. So I did look up in the product docs, and the user object sync is essentially a standard sync that is syncing like the sales owner and the account owner fields. So you want to follow the method that Charlie had talked about to bring over any custom data from the user object and have those replicated on the core Salesforce objects.
But indeed, going back to the original question, I think it was about custom fields being on that user object, and I don't think they sync to Marketo. So then making that available on the person record So on your leader contact in Salesforce would be the only route.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to jump to a question that I think is related to some of the data management questions we were just running through a minute ago. Really interesting one for the champion group. We used to have inferred country in our segments, but feel that this is useless now since hybrid work is common. Is it ever good to use inferred anything? I thought this was very interesting given we are kind of in a different world now work-wise.
Hybrid work is definitely done some significant damage to the usefulness of those inferred fields. That data is, as long as that person is cookied, that data will be populated. So, what it can tell you, is if that person is logging in from an office location that it can reverse IP to, it will give you account level information. However, your point is very well taken. It will also give you, a sense, if you want to use that data, it will give you a sense of who's cookied, who's not, because anybody that's not cookied, you won't get or hasn't given you cookie permissions, it won't give you that inferred data. So, GDPR is also doing a little bit damage to our ability to track against that. But also, if you're getting, home addresses or ISPs, that's giving you a sense of what percentage of your audience is working from an office location versus a remote home location. So if that information is helpful for you, that could be a good use case for it. Charlie?
Yeah, we always take a blended approach. You only get a little piece of the puzzle when you sort of have that information or that inferred information in Marketo. It's always good to look to a number of different things. Patterns, what they're seeing on the site, what those visitors are kind of doing, but then also tapping into the knowledge that, say, other platforms have. So we work with Lead Forensics. We use their database of reverse IP to also enrich and have a look at those accounts that are visiting on the site. And so we can then start to find all those pieces to push and create a full picture about actually what accounts are coming to the website across what devices, because the sort of the ability to work across devices, actually across multiple locations, is even making that puzzle a little bit sort of harder. But Marketo has all of the things that you need in order to plug those together, and in the integration to work with third parties to understand who is visiting your web assets.
All right, thank you. I'm going to jump to, if there aren't any, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. I'm going to jump to one that was pre-submitted. We've kind of taken a tour of many different Marketo topics, and I think one that we have not covered yet, but I'm sure is top of mind for many, is a CDP, or a customer data platform. So one of the pre-submitted questions we had was, what aspects of a CDP entity can Marketo Engage cover? Or is it necessary to involve a separate CDP platform in addition to Marketo? So this is a really good and timely one. Any of the champs want to jump in on this in particular?
I can take this one, or try to take this one, and the fellow champs can add some information on their thoughts. I think Marketo Engage is not a CDP in as is, so it covers many features of being so flexible in terms of collecting and storing information, as well as the fact that it's the integrations that you have with your CRM system, with other platforms, using the Marketo REST API, as well as webhooks to communicate with other platforms, and integration is very is a very strong feature. But still, when it comes to gathering data or storing data from a bespoke data source, I think that's where it becomes a little bit trickier in terms of using Marketo as a CDP, because it's not a CDP. So then I would recommend to like go for a separate tooling instead of trying to use Marketo Engage as a CDP.
I would second that, because essentially what a CDP is you're bringing all of your customer data together and all of the relationships that customer has with different interaction points with your company. And those data sets can get very large, and you essentially want to use that CDP to activate different audiences to your operational platforms, and essentially take a lot of that heavy big data processing away from your operational platforms, where you need to quickly get emails out, you need to quickly react and send communications out, which is where Marketo thrives. So you want Marketo to be nimble and able to execute on your marketing actions, and whether that's reacting to somebody filling out a form and getting that person quickly to your sales team, or sending autoresponders based upon campaign actions. Mixing that with a lot of big data will slow down those processes and will impact your ability to push out communications in that timely manner. So I definitely second having a separate CDP platform to handle the big data operations that you need a CDP to be able to do.
Love it. Yes. And I think we had one other question that I will jump to. It got buried in the chat, so thanks for raising it. Could you share best practices regarding the translation of Marketo pages and Marketo forms? Example of a website in 2 languages, currently considering a couple options.
This is a great question. I suspect actually probably Katja has the right answer to this one, but I'm going to try and get in there first and suggest that actually looking at how your Marketo instance is organized is the first step that you need to do, or to look at, in terms of using workspaces and partitions. Katja, would you agree with that? Would you?
Well, I think what Chris was showing earlier on the segmentations is actually an interesting one. I think I'm assuming that it's about how to host the different content presented, rather than making the actual translations. But I would say there's actually 2 different routes to go, and one would be to use a segmentation, so have a language segmentation and create a dynamic landing page that will present the information in the language preference of that person in the database. However, that does make it more difficult for your end user to self-select. So if you want somebody to be able to switch from the English version to the Italian version, then you would want to set up 2 different pages, and I would in the header create an option to switch.
Charlie was correct. Katja, you were the one to tap. Thank you, Charlie, for that as well. So I think we have had lots of, and actually, let me just double check. Okay. So we've had some really great kind of deep dive, more technical questions in the chat, which is awesome. Please continue to submit those if you have them. I wanted to just, while we have time, take us in a slightly different direction, and maybe jump kind of up higher level a bit for the champs, because we have the time, and I think it's always nice to kind of pair some of the technical stuff with also maybe the more kind of vision, looking out at the industry, at the space. And so one of the questions that was submitted ahead of time was, in terms of Marketo and marketing operations, what are you most looking forward to in 2025? And so I thought that would be great to kind of get all the champions to weigh in on. It's a very good question. I think there's a lot on the horizon, and so I'd love to have the group hear from the champs on that as well. I'm gonna tap Charlie. Do you want to kick us off?
I'm a big fan of AI, and next year looks like it's going to be the year of AI, with new AI capabilities in things like email builders and landing page builders, generative content that enable your sort of marketing teams to create content really sort of quickly. So that is the thing that I'm most looking forward to next year. It's going to give us some incredible results at speed and at scale.
Yeah, tying onto that, I think you already referred to the new email and landing page editors that do come with generative AI features, as does interactive webinar. I think it's going to be one of the near releases early in 2025, where interactive webinars will have their recordings and summaries be created by Gen AI. But also, I think the email editor that's being worked on at the moment, as well as the landing page editor themselves, are maybe some would say overdue, but really good improvements that are coming in the near future, making that content creation experience quite different from what Marketo users see today.
Yeah, another, like, just staying on the topic of AI, one feature that I'm really looking forward to is within interactive webinars, the AI feature will essentially create after that webinar is completed, it will create that landing page. And of course, you're going to have AI generate the transcript. But also it's going to have the ability to create chapters or content blocks intelligently based upon your webinar. So instead of just sending out like a full recording to your audience and asking them to, listen to a 45-minute webinar presentation, you can send them a AI generated chapterized version. So you can highlight specific parts of the webinar that have very high value, rather than just sending the full recording. And I think that's going to be very exciting for those of us who do a lot of content marketing.
Love it. Let's see, Ilona?
Yeah, I think to add on the features, like specifically to Marketo, that have been already addressed, I think from our perspective, like from our business, what will be very interesting also in the interactive webinar add-on that's going to be there is to really get things done or learn more in terms of engagement of your audience that was present at your interactive webinar, and share this information with sales to further work with leads and know how they've been reacting to the webinar that you organized, and really give them some starting points to further develop business. Like for us in our industry or in our company, our business is focused on B2B 80%, and it's all about like retention and also trading. So if we want to get more business out of that, all of the data that we can get out of these webinars, etc., that will be very, very interesting for us to see in further business development. So looking forward to that.
Excellent. And Chris, did we hear from you on this one?
I believe so.
Okay, great. Just making sure. Okay, so thank you all for that. I think it's always really good to zoom out for a second. We do have a couple questions that popped up in the chat around kind of hearkening back to the question we had. So looks like, Christian, there's 2 questions in here, and I think I'm reading it properly, so let me know if not. But translation of Marketo web forms, if the data fields will mirror the NAM data fields, how can we support that? Please advise, is the question. Any of the champs want to jump in? I don't know, Katja, I think you kind of took the lead on that question, if you've got any thoughts.
Well, translating Marketo forms is actually creating a second form and putting that in as dynamic content on your pages. Translation code, yeah. A lot can be done, of course, with coding and scripting. I'm not entirely sure whether I understand the data fields question there.
Yeah, same. I wanted to make sure it's kind of, hopefully they're not, I can't tell if they're like separate questions or I thought they were related, but maybe we can come back to that one. Christian, if you get a chance to drop a bit more context into the chat, might be helpful. And then we can circle back to that question. In the meantime, we want to kind of level set. We're about an hour in. We have an hour left if we have the time or want the time. Want to kind of check in if there's any other kind of burning questions. Now would be a great time for the audience members. Drop them in the chat. I want to make sure we can get to them. We've got a few more pre-submitted questions that we'll run through. Okay. Excellent, Kay. I think you had a question on AEP pushing lists over to Marketo Engage with only 3 fields, first, last name, and email address. How can we create the segmentation around this and any dynamic content? Any advice? A lot of questions on segmentation today. I like it.
Yeah, true. And I'm not too sure there is too much to segment based on those 3 fields, to be honest. I do have a customer where first name is very relevant because they're marketing to farmers, and the farmer and the farmer's wife traditionally have very different roles. So that's where first name can be used for segmentation. But I think you need a little bit more information to segment other than those 3 fields. But you can also, of course, segment based on behavior. It doesn't need to be the data points in your record.
Excellent. Another quick question in the group on how many years back is the best practice for archiving an older program?
I can quickly take that one. And I would say the best practice really depends upon like how long you're keeping those programs active, and how, if those programs are still being promoted on your website or being promoted somewhere and attracting membership to them. So I don't know if there's any like defined timeline. I think generally for like say for email programs and like one-time campaigns, archiving every year is a good best practice. It's a good conservative best practice. But ultimately you want to run an analysis of like, are those campaigns continuing, or programs continuing to bring membership into them? And so you want to take that into account, and look at like your always on campaigns and your like one-time campaigns. And like essentially once they're not active and you're outside of your reporting period, which is why I would generally like advise towards 1 year, because generally you look at your programs year by year, and if you want to do year over year, you may want to keep 2 years of history. But you also want to be cognizant of how many active campaigns you have in your Marketo instance, because you want you want to take performance into consideration as well. So 1 year if you're just looking at current year programs, 2 years or 18 months if you're doing some year-over-year reporting. But have a continuous process where you're always looking at your potential archive programs, because it can build up if you're not doing it fairly regularly.
Excellent, thank you. And Ilona, did you want to jump in as well?
Yeah, I agree with Chris. Like, I think on our side also, like every year before the end of the fiscal year, we do our analysis, and after that, basically we are having a look at the folder structure, and we divide between like always on campaigns which are running for like multiple as the name says, just a longer period of time. So for these ones, it doesn't make sense to put them in an archive folder since they're running. But we do have like events that are year-based, or email campaigns that are year-based. So for these, we just do the yearly cleanup or the yearly archiving at the end of the fiscal year. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. So I'll do one last question from Kay about webinars, and then we will close. So the question is, should we integrate On24 to handle webinars, or should we use interactive webinars? Excellent question. I'm going to tap Chris for this one. I know you have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah. I'd love to give the Katja's take on this, because you've done a lot of work with interactive webinars. So I think the question, I would also pose a question back to you of, how much is are you using On24 today? Is this like a technical evaluation, or yes or no? And if the answer is I'm considering On24 and I haven't put it into my stack yet, definitely explore using interactive webinars first, because you are going to get about 80 to 90% of those On24 features that are high value with interactive webinars. There are some things that On24 is really good at, your multi-session type of events, your digital summits. So you may have a use case for bringing On24 in. I would be careful and very thoughtful with how you're integrating it, because there's a lot of customizations with the On24 integration that you'll need to consider. So my advice, if you're considering both of those, is to leverage interactive webinars for the bulk of your webinar activities, because you have very straightforward triggers and filters within Marketo that you can use, and then use On24 for those really complex events that On24 has been designed to handle, and have a integration that makes sense for you, but don't try to overcomplicate it.
No, totally agree with you there, Chris. I would say also do a price comparison. Of course, interactive webinar you can experiment with and you can experience for yourself for free anyway, because all of the Marketo instances have 12 webinars for free every year to start off with. But if you need more, you need to compare the pricing versus the benefits of the different options. And yes, I do agree that for the more complex event programs, On24 might be a better use case, but I see that the interactive webinar is developing fast. The new Gen AI features that are coming there are really cool, but they're also working quite hard to make it easier to create your webinar room templates with your own branding. And there is no equal out there, I would say, in getting that rich engagement data from your webinar within, they claim 45 minutes to up to 2 hours that you'll get your data back. Usually, my experience, it's within the hour that you have all of the engagement in detail back that you can filter off and trigger off. And I don't think there's an equal out there in terms of that.
Thank you, Katja. Okay, so we're going to close for the day. This recording will be made available in the Bevy chapter, and definitely reach out to any of us, me particularly, if you need help finding it. On LinkedIn is fine. Thank you all for joining across the globe, and thank you to the champions for taking the time out of your day to do this. And we will catch you all next time.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
See you, folks.